Thank you, everyone, for staying to this second speech. I put a scarf because it's very cold, so sorry for the little change. I have the great pleasure today to be talking about the future of finance, all still on this topic of trust, innovation, but particularly on the European leadership with Dominik Asam. We need some
Perfect
training
pronunciation
of the pronunciation. And what we want to dive in today is leveraging the expertise of Dominik as the global CFO of SAP. SAP being a company with more than 400,000 clients, and I think 75% of the financial flow that are happening at some point are passing through SAP. So what we want to squeeze out of you is all this knowledge of the global ecosystem and how we make a more capable Europe on AI topics. First question on this topic, it's something a bit broad, but what do you see in the global market, not only on finance, as big challenges and topic that AI are tackling and helping on?
Yeah, the challenges are actually multifold. First of all, we have a pretty sluggish macroeconomic backdrop that's partially driven by population growth, decelerating in some of the major economies on this planet. It's also driven by less and less globalization. It's clear that we have been benefiting by huge productivity gains from globalization, which are currently to some degree unwound. And last but not least, except for the US maybe, there's still that drive to decarbonize the planet, which is absorbing a certain share of the world's growth into basically a toll which needs to be paid to decarbonize the world. So that makes the growth for companies more difficult to find, and it increases the pressure because when the pie is smaller, there's more competitive pressure. So that sounds a little bit bleak, but the good news is we also have that wonderful technological disruption, which is AI. I always remind people that in the previous decades, the digital productivity gains were driven by Moore's law, which implied a 2x productivity every 1.5 years. Now when we test these foundation models, we see something like 10x per annum. Yeah? So much faster productivity gains, and now it's all about embedding that into our corporations to make sure that we can cope with these headwinds.
Yeah, it's very clear on the situation of the market. Can you zoom in a little more on the financial services, particularly specific industry with specific challenges, and how they tackle, of course, these challenges?
I think there are a couple of characteristics in financial services which are interesting. One is, of course, the regulation. I mean, there's no industry that is as heavily regulated, and it's fragmented by region, even by nation state, and it's a moving target. Secondly, another moving target is business models change. There is competition from new entrants, fintechs. There are some retail companies suddenly entering the financial services market. I always bring the example of Mercado Libre in Latin America. 100 million customers, suddenly they have a super lean bank they launch and are competing with the banks. So, and then it's also quite personal intensive still. It's a little bit similar to our own business. A large share of the cost base is in personnel expense, and that personnel expense is actually increasing kind of automatically because there's merit hikes every year. So it's actually a quite complicated, difficult environment, but again, AI can certainly add some solutions to that problem.
Yeah, and specifically on the last topic that you tackle, which is all the cost structure of like the cost to serve, we see the new game being an agentic and process reinvention. And I would like to pick your brain on two things now. First one, how can we use this technology and this opportunity to improve the cost to serve? And the second question, I keep it for after, but it's specifically about SAP. So I just pose the second question, I will do step by step.
Yeah, but I think it's probably somewhat related because I always, when discussing these challenges with customers, try to link it and say, I mean, what are we doing to try to cope with that headwind? First of all, it's very important that already in a 5-year strategic plan, you think about your AI roadmap. what are the financial targets? I'm a CFO, so I care about what to communicate to financial markets. What are my financial targets? How can I set the right ambition level? And that's an iteration process. If you ask the organization bottom up, show me what you think you can do with AI, you will be not surprised that the answer is nothing. Because they will all say, whatever benefit I can reap from this, I want to use that internally to protect my budgets, to maybe do more. So you have to do a lot of top-down guidance and say, there's a certain productivity requirement which I need to hit my numbers to come to the right envelope, so to speak. And then you need to really break that work of making the workforce more efficient down into the large, heavy processes. You can do a lot of grassroots improvements here and there that will move the needle a little bit, but the real massive progress is made when you really tackle the large processes which are transversely running through the company, which makes things much more difficult because suddenly you need an orchestration, you need a project management. So it's all about designing projects that are tackling the resource intensity and the efficiency and the assurance level and the output of these processes, and to think about how can we embed these agents, and now we come to the agent question, into the workflow so that I can augment what people are doing, maybe at some point in time all the way to full automation. And we have to task every single function in the company to think about how to achieve that and really get feedback from them as to how to do it and bring the right people into the company to support the domain experts with that kind of data science knowledge, with the AI knowledge, to really start spinning the flywheel in this new way of innovating the processes.
Yeah, because I didn't say that before, but SAP, you did a massive game-changing transformation of your organization itself to have a full cloud approach. So you reinvented your business, and you are a super business-critical partner for a lot of companies, and many companies. Can you give us a few words about this transformation? Of course, the why, it's quite clear, but as well, what were very difficult and how you tackled it? Because I think a lot of big corp are now changing in depth of their invention in financial services.
For SAP, the big thing 5 years back was to say we are late on the journey to the cloud. We have to change that, because what our customers did is they took our software, and then the SIs and the business customized that software very, very heavily in a quite unstructured way, which then meant that whenever we need to do an upgrade, it's super expensive, and then upgrades were procrastinated by customers, and then our software was a software of yesterday, and the innovation we brought to the customers was not really consumable. So we had to say, we have to take care of the upgrades ourselves. We have to provide a methodology to depollute our core from customization, partition the solution in a way that is easier to upgrade, and bring it to the cloud. That was super painful. We had to invest much more money than investors thought at that point in time. We deferred some revenues to the right, because of course the subscription model in cloud is a back-end loaded, versus license payments are upfront. And the share price dropped 30 to 40%. But it was absolutely unavoidable to do it. We would be, I'd say, pretty much dead in the water for AI now hadn't we done that, because we can only efficiently deploy AI in a cloud system. We can only train our models gathering the anonymized data from our customers in the cloud and then training our models on top of that. So it was a super critical transformation. It was also painful. Last year we had to let go 10,000 people. By the way, we rehired more than 11,000 in the interim. It costs us some 3.2 billion to do that. But there's also an opportunity these days. There is a huge demographic baby boomer bubble almost going to retirement the next years. So it's very important to have that strategic workforce planning together with the IT planning to really have a clear view on how exactly we want to transform our companies.
And on this specific point, how do you see the future of hiring for SAP? Because you said you had to let go people, now you are still hiring, of course.
Yeah.
Agents or AI is taking some part of the job, but what is the strategy of taking the next generation of worker at SAP?
I mean, there's different grades of profiles which are in high demand. And luckily we are quite efficient in recruiting them, because our pitch, of course, to these people is, now do you want to do that job for one company, or do you want to do that job for tens of thousands of companies at the same time by developing great products for these clients? And the important thing is really to break down the hiring into a granular job description profile, a talent map of what you need by when, and to also be a little bit honest about what are the jobs that will disappear. And then we have to look at retraining as much as we can, but even if that's not possible, think about alternatives. And this is why it's important to think about how can you really get that agility into the workforce, which in countries in Europe is quite a difficult challenge. So one of the regulatory headwinds we have is that we are a little bit handcuffed in this region of the world to execute such a transformation. But it needs to be granular. It's all about granular, be it on data, be it on talents. It's about that high degree of transparency on what exactly we need.
You did a perfect transition for the last part of this discussion, which is this area of the world, being Europe. The broad question would be, what should we do on the AI topic? And as well, where do you see it going for the moment? Is there a turn that you would specifically take?
I think the big battle on consumer-related businesses is unfortunately already quite progressed. If you think about what people do on mobile applications with AI, consumer-related, the Americans are clearly leading the charge. On the other hand, it was also mentioned in the prior panel, in business, in B2B, we have different criteria. We need to have highly reliable, high fidelity data. We cannot do trial and error. We cannot afford hallucinations. So it's all about quality of data. And guess what? The data is not created on a GPU by NVIDIA. No, zero data is created on a GPU. It's created in the application. So it's where the processes of the customer meet the IT in an application. And also transactions are not done in the GPU. They are triggered again in an application. So that's where we in Europe have a strong base to build on. We have the applications here, which are sovereign because they're European, at least if it's SAP. You have the flood of data in all these great world-leading companies, especially on industrial side, that you can leverage. And we now have to start spinning the flywheel in between to really enhance the quality of the data, to make sure that it's semantically harmonized, it's accessible, it's context-rich, to then start spinning the flywheel on the B2B side. So this is where I sense there's a big opportunity for Europe. There's now a big debate after the noise around the new administration in the United States. Will certain critical industries be at risk because the US hyperscalers might turn off the lights in 1 second? And first of all, I have to confess that SAP is a super big user of US hyperscalers. So I'd say the lion's share of our compute capacity comes from the 3 big US hyperscalers. But we can also offer alternatives. We've also decided that for those industries where you absolutely need a longer time to wall, to have a time period during which nobody can switch you off, you want to have everything that's required to achieve that goal under your control. So that's a sovereign cloud on an operational, legal layer, and also on a technical layer. And these products are currently brought to the market for, first and foremost, defense industry. By the way, there we are far behind too. United States, we are running defense workloads since 8 years in the cloud on one single platform. In Europe, we are just starting to talk about it. And we have probably half a dozen at least platforms competing for the same idea, which makes the scaling very, very difficult. So we now have to really kick into gear, speed up, deregulate. I think we have a lot of handcuffs with EU Data Act, EU AI Act. Some of these things are good, but there's a lot of excessive regulation. I always say we have this kind of too much care kills the cat syndrome. So EU always waits for everything and is scared about everything. But the fact is, if you're too slow, the prey will disappear or it will be eaten by your competitor. So we have to be much faster, and regulation is a super big impediment to speed.
Yeah, very clear. We have 30 seconds more. Do you have a last word, like maybe on what is the big challenge that you want to tackle in the next 2 or 3 years with SAP on this field?
Yeah, it's really to bring that strategic workforce planning together with the technology, the recognition that change is hard. It needs to be really managed with a lot of care. Sometimes these IT projects, which are not really IT projects, they run out of funding for the most important part, which is really taking the employees by the hand. It's all about bringing the cost and the predictability and the risk of these projects down, leveraging AI. And it's all about bringing the benefits of these journeys up by leveraging AI. And on both fronts, there's huge innovation currently happening. And yeah, I think this is a good opportunity to learn more about this on this event here.
Well, thanks a lot, Dominique. Very insightful.
Thanks for having me.
A pleasure.